5 chapters in, and it looks like our main characters are, in fact, bums. We've seen them fight 2 cursed users at this point, but despite the fact they cannot seem to win on their own, needing Maru to come and save them both times by the looks of it, Tsurugi, whilst seemingly having the higher potential of the 2 okkotsu grandchildren in my opinion, he still has yet to show us anything worthy of the heavenly restriction he seemingly has, as well as Rika's ring adorning his neck. At this point, at the start of the series, ironically enough, Tsurugi seems more like Miwa than he does Maki, but out of the 2 new age sorcerers, Tsurugi is undoubtedly the stronger of the 2 by a relatively significant margin. But for now, let's take a look at Modulo in a vacuum to see if we can determine how strong Tsurugi is without comparing him to the main series, and then in turn after that comparing him to the main trio to see how they all compare to this latest generation of sorcerer. But before I go too deep into the video, there is something I have to mention about legality in regards to Modulo videos on YouTube. It's a bit annoying, but unfortunately Shueisha has been really coming after people for using Modulo panels in YouTube videos. Like a couple of my friends who also make JJK videos have been getting their videos taken down and getting DMCA'd, and it's really annoying. So to avoid all that nonsense, I'm only going to put specific relevant panels on screen when absolutely necessary, and on top of that I will have photoshopped the panels a little bit just so it's not as easy for the bots to pick it up. Also on top of that, feel free to like, comment and subscribe and become a member, because I'm going to start doing members only videos on this channel. But with that little bit of preamble out of the way, let's get into it and find out how strong is Tsurugi. So in Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo, we come to learn a couple things about Tsurugi that allow us to scale how strong he is. He seemingly has an unawakened heavenly restriction similar to Maki in the main series before the Zenin clan massacre. We can gather this from a couple of different statements. Grandma Maki herself saying to a 7-year-old Tsurugi, "You're just like me, Tsurugi." But given the fact that he clearly isn't as strong as Toji or Maki was, it makes sense that he is in a similar state to Maki pre-awakening. This is of course further supported by statements that just flat out say he doesn't have cursed energy. For example, in the first chapter when Tsurugi gets teleported away without his cursed tools, since they do have cursed energy and he doesn't. And Yuka herself just flat out states that he doesn't have cursed energy and just fights with cursed tools. However, despite this lesser heavenly restriction, we have statements that suggest Yuka is relative to Tsurugi. However, Tsurugi is undoubtedly stronger than her by a significant margin. I mean, we literally see them fight. As soon as Yuka sees a captured Tsurugi, she immediately challenges him to a duel in which Tsurugi doesn't have a cursed tool, but he still easily squashes that beef pretty seamlessly. Granted, she doesn't seem to be using her cursed technique here, so I doubt she's going all out, but at the same time, given how easily she was beaten, it is a pretty fair assumption to say Tsurugi is the stronger of the 2. Despite the fact that Yuka herself says that Usami apparently stated that the 2 siblings are around the same level, that doesn't matter, given the fact that Yuka and Tsurugi's entire dynamic hinges upon the fact that Tsurugi is stronger than Yuka, and as a result, he was given Rika's ring. So yes, Tsurugi is kind of inarguably stronger at the start of the series. We also have seen Tsurugi use a simple domain on a few occasions, which may lead some to believe that Tsurugi is stronger than he actually is. However, having a simple domain isn't indicative of a specific skill level. I mean, Miwa started the series with a simple domain and immediately got washed by a pre-awakening Maki, so whilst it is cool that Tsurugi is seemingly somehow using the cursed energy from his cursed tools to somehow create a simple domain, just being able to use one doesn't in of itself mean much. Okay, so we know that Tsurugi is stronger than Yuka, but that doesn't mean too much, since so far her biggest feat is using big fingernails, which is like a feat relative to that one Reggie Star jobber from the Culling Games, so it doesn't mean much. So what else can we gather specifically about Tsurugi's level? Well, in the latest 5th chapter of Modulo, we've been seeing Tsurugi fight a cursed user, and on the surface, that seems pretty standard. However, in the fight, Tsurugi himself comments that this cursed user may be around the level of a grade 1 sorcerer. Now, on the surface, this may seem like a huge upskill for Tsurugi. However, there are a couple of factors that make this statement have significantly less weight. So in Modulo, it is stated that since the Shinjuku showdown with Sukuna, sorcerers have grown weaker in general over time, which means that chances are what is determined to be grade 1 level more than likely has lower credentials than what it used to be. On top of that, after Tsurugi uses a simple domain that counters anything that enters it, similarly to Kusakabe's domain, even with that buff, he is still clashing with the cursed user, meaning that chances are he is still weaker than this more than likely weaker than grade 1 cursed user. The only time this cursed user seemed to take damage is when Yuka suddenly appears behind him and the 2 siblings try to blitz this cursed user, or for him to reveal that he didn't really take damage and was fine. So it's fair to say that Tsurugi in particular is below grade 1 by a significant margin, even though grade 1s are more than likely not what they used to be, so to speak. So in my personal opinion, at the start of the series, despite it heavily implying that these 2 will reach the heights similar to that of their grandparents, these 2 are starting around somewhere in between grade 2 and grade 3 level. And I mean, this makes sense. the fact that Megumi started the series as a grade 2 and Nobara at grade 3. However, despite this, I feel like it's fair to say that Tsurugi would get washed by a lot of the early cast of the main series. So let's get into why. Let's take a look at the trio at the start of the series and have a little bit of a comparison between the new gen and the old gen. So let's start with Yuji. He's a beast. He has comparable, if not higher, physical strength than Maki without cursed energy at the start of the series. Megumi says this in goodwill, but given the fact that Megumi thought Yuji was dead for like 20 chapters or so, it's fair to say that Megumi's statement is a judgment based on what he saw during Yuji and Megumi's fight versus the curse at the start of the series, when Yuji and Megumi pretty much first meet, as well as what he saw in the correctional facility. Then Yuji learns cursed energy pretty quickly by around chapter 13, then fights some fodder transfigured humans, but as it progresses during the Mahito arc, we get to see Yuji going one-on-one against Mahito, a special grade curse, a curse that Nanami himself was going one-on-one with a grade 1 sorcerer, and Yuji himself is somewhat replicating this feat within the first 30 chapters of the series. Granted, it's fair to say that Yuji here is performing a good chunk worse than Nanami did in the sewers, but overall it's fair to say that Yuji fighting a special grade curse here is ridiculous. And also, don't forget, sorcerers have grown weaker over time, meaning that not only is Tsurugi struggling with a curse user who is more than likely weaker than a grade 1 sorcerer, Yuji is performing better than him after only just learning about cursed energy and Jujutsu as a whole, while Tsurugi has been groomed by the Gojo clan to become stronger and learning about cursed energy and being a sorcerer from a very young age, hence him having Rika's ring as well as the ability to form a symbol domain. But that doesn't matter, because Yuji, as soon as he learns how cursed energy works, more than likely stomps Tsurugi. Versus Mahito arc, Yuji is an absolute beast compared to him. Anything before that, Yuji doesn't even have cursed energy really, so it would be a little unfair, but still kind of contentious, since if you agree that Tsurugi is just a stand-in for early Maki, and Yuji without cursed energy is similar to or above that, Yuji with just Slaughter Demon might butcher Tsurugi, who knows. But let's move on to the second member of the trio, Megumi. He kind of just evaporates Tsurugi. At the start of the series, Megumi is a grade 2 sorcerer, and despite all the memes about his potential, he was decently strong at the start of the series. I mean, he was capable of being punched through buildings by Three-Finger Sukuna and still living, and as that scuffle comes to its conclusion, he almost whipped out Maharaga. So no matter what, Tsurugi will not win, but I don't think he even would need Maharaga, let's be honest. Don't forget that grade 3 is the average rank for a sorcerer, and Megumi is grade 2 when we first meet him. However, on the flip side, when we see Megumi go up against a main series grade 1 sorcerer opponent in this brief scuffle with Todo, it is very clear that Megumi, without just spamming Maharaga, is significantly below this level at the start of the series, because Todo absolutely clears him with very little effort. But Megumi does manage to stay alive. But at the same time, when we see him at the start of the series, he is already an experienced sorcerer with access to a good chunk of the creatures from the Ten Shadows arsenal. So again, whilst the start of series, Megumi doesn't have much to show for himself in regards to feats, unless we go all the way to him beating a special grade curse on his own after unlocking his own domain, but that's kind of at the end of the first season, so it's kind of a bit unfair to compare Megumi with a domain capable of beating a special grade curse against Tsurugi when we see how much Megumi grew within the span of the first season, or the first 50-60 chapters or so, because at the start of the series, Megumi is running away from a finger bearer, then within the span of a first season, he is opening a domain, and he is beating a relative, if not stronger, finger bearer on his own. So he goes from being around grade 2 level to grade 1 within the span of the first season, or around 50-60 chapters. So as I say, it's a bit disingenuous to compare start of series Tsurugi versus end of Origin of Obedience Megumi, but Megumi, even at the start of the series, would still probably win in my opinion. Frogs solo. Well, what about Nobara? She probably gets washed, more than likely. She is a Momo and Haruta victim for a bit. She's kind of cooked, to be honest. Like, start series Nobara is pretty much a bum. She's kind of relatively featless and she doesn't really do much. She just gets simple domain battered into pieces. There's not really much to say. Since I said Tsurugi is more than likely between grade 2 and grade 3, why don't we take a look at a character who is exactly in between the middle of those grades? Panda. He's a semi-grade 2, and I'm gonna be real, I think Tsurugi is also a Panda victim. Panda is capable of surviving Ultimate Mecha Maru's Ultimate Cannon, as well as transforming into his Gorilla Mode, and he seems to actually knock back Todo, which is something that Megumi couldn't do during their scuffle. Like, there is nothing really major about Panda in regards to like mega AP feats and stuff at the start of the series, but I'm just trying to get a point across now. The amount I'm gassing up the main series characters makes sense when you look back at that one statement about sorcerers growing weaker over time, and it really kind of feels like that. Unless Tsurugi fully awakens his heavenly restriction next chapter or something, I don't see my feelings on this guy changing too much. Unless Rika maybe breaks out with a ring to protect Yuka or something, but beyond that, who knows? As I say in conclusion, I believe that Tsurugi, though relative to Yuka, is of course stronger. However, in the world of Modulo, where sorcerers have seemingly grown weaker over time, it appears that Tsurugi is a strong case study to follow that seems to strengthen that statement. There is no Gojo around forcing his students to grow stronger and force the skill level of the world higher. As far as we know, we don't even know if there are any new special grade sorcerers, since by the time Modulo takes place, Yuta has already passed, meaning that there are no sorcerers anywhere near the peaks of Jujutsu we saw 68 years ago. And as a result, the level of sorcerers overall has declined. Tsurugi, despite his heavenly restriction and his use of a simple domain, in spite of his, lack of cursed energy, still doesn't reach the heights of his predecessors at the start of their respective series. But who knows, him seeing Yuka getting injured in this latest chapter will force some sort of awakening in the next. Right now, the level of sorcerers in the world of Modulo is pretty trash, and despite how cool Tsurugi is in my opinion, in regards to scaling, he's kinda whack.